You are, huh?
Do we have a majority of any boards here? Well, this is full.
No, I guess not.
Guess
But
it's
I'm
really
still going to
not.
record it for informational
This
sake.
is for you.
All right.
This is for you. Open session public meetings is subject to being videotaped. We're being videotaped. Your image and voice may be recorded per the open meeting law, chapter 38, section 20E. We don't have a majority. This is really not an open meeting. This is not going to be any discussion that leads to votes. There are not going to be any votes tonight. This is just an open session because you are hiring first time a new town administrator effective July 1st. And we've been chosen by the Board of Selectmen on behalf of the town to do the search firm for you. And we now have a majority of the Board of Selectmen, so this is formally a meeting, even though everything I just said is still true. So, by way of saying that, I'm Steve Rollins from Municipal Resources, Inc. And I've been with the firm since 2012, and I've been on recruitments over 20 communities. And I'm briefly going to tell you the process, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Bob. He's going to introduce himself, because at the last meeting, I had trouble getting someone to sit at the front table with me. So we've solved that problem.
I don't know, I just may go right there after I heard that.
And I have permission from the selectmen to come without a tie on, because I wanted to feel comfortable. And that's very intentional, because everyone needs to feel comfortable, because we're here to get information from you folks. And when I stop talking, then you know it's your turn. Well, after I stop talking and after Bob stops talking. The whole point is, because it's not so much the notes that we take, but the impressions that we get. And then we turn around, and over the next month, towards the end of next month, we're going to be talking to candidates. And so we're going to be talking about things that you tell us about Berlin. I looked it up. The emphasis is on the Berlin. So our process is that we've been very busy the last 3 weeks working with your selectmen. We created an advertisement that started the discussion. We've been on the phone with your board about an hour, sometimes an hour plus, conversations with the board talking about the town, and they all care deeply about the town, so this is a wonderful starting point. And then we developed a profile of the ideal candidate from these discussions, and then a profile of the town from a candidate viewpoint. So we're like looking to see an advertisement that says first-time town administrator. Now that's an attractive point for some candidates. Those are the candidates we're looking for, right? So we immediately got some interest in that, and then we talk about Berlin and see if we got some more interest generated by them reading that. So they read through that information. It's been approved by the board. It's gone to the personnel board. I understand that they've approved it. Everybody's had some input, a little change here, a little change there, but I think we're on the right route to create something that sounds like an interesting town for someone to come serve in. So I think we've had some success, and the board's been working hard the last 3 weeks with us to do that. So here we are. We've gone through that process, and we're just about ready to wind up the written part of that process. And we're going to go advertise next week. And then a period of about 30 days takes place where we're waiting. So far as you're concerned, looks like nothing's happening. But we have to give a time period for these candidates to start submitting their information. Now, I think the secret is we don't necessarily wait the whole 30 days. You know, some candidates submit before the 30 days are up, and we like what we see. And so we will have been building some questions based on the input of what I just talked about. And so we send out essay questions. You know, I don't know quite how to word this. I've never figured out quite how to word this, but we're not always just like easy on all these candidates. And we're not mean to them either, but we're trying to make them work hard enough so that we can figure out who they are. So these essay questions are designed to make them think about who they are relative to the position they're applying for. So the essay questions are designed to be questions that elicit information that would help us see if they're going to fit this town. very point blank. So we send them out, then they get a few days, whatever we determine, to get those back to us. And we start looking those over, and then we start phone interviews, and we start grilling them. 2 of us on our end, 1 of them on their end. And we go through that process. And then we get down to where we started thinking, okay, we're ready for the search committee. And then we come back to here. So this is, what do you say, a month and a half after we start the advertisement, probably?
Yeah, the
I mean,
process moves fairly quick. The timeframe gets extended a bit because of the essay requirement,
Yeah.
where we try to give the candidates, keep in mind what the timeframe, and you all know this, you town officials, difficult time right now. A lot of the folks who are maybe interested, are very interested in what's going on in their own communities currently because of town meetings and
Yep.
budget prep and all that stuff. So we try to give everyone a 10-day period to answer the essays. And in that 10-day period, we try to make it 2 weekends, 2 consecutive weekends. So
yes.
if you're busy during the week, hopefully on the weekend, you won't be as busy in the town you're currently employed in or not, and you can do the work on the weekends.
We figure they can give up their tennis time for Berlin,
Yeah.
right? Why not? And so we're cognizant of the fact, I believe it's May 6th is your town meeting, the first day, right? Is that right? First night of town meeting, if that's right. Monday, Tuesday, and then you got your election. So, we got to time it around that because you've got an article that you have to fund the position, and we've got to be cognizant of that timing. And then you've got July 1st, we have to be cognizant of the timing. And we go through the search committee, bring in multiple candidates. I don't know the number. I don't know how many good ones are going to be coming through. And then we've got to go down, and then comes the point where we're down to, 3, 4, 5, maybe, I don't know, going to the selectmen. Public hearings, you'll all be able to see it. The selectmen will know everything that we know about these candidates, and they're going to be making a decision at some point, right at that point. And we're going to help with the contract negotiations. We're going to have been working back and forth between the candidates and the board, but at that point, in terms of choosing, we're out of it. It's your choice. And as I said, with the prior meeting that we had last week was mostly with the department people and employees. And I said to them, you may sit there and think, you're looking at the TV or you're in the room and say, I really hope they choose that candidate over there. And the selectmen don't, and you're disappointed. And I was saying, let it go. Don't worry about it. What's more important is that the selectmen choose a candidate they're comfortable with. Because that 4 people are going to form a team, and that's what you want. And it's better for you in the long run that they form that foursome and that they're comfortable. In the long run, that's going to work out better for you as an employee. Now, it's a different situation for you as citizens and as committee people, because your wishes are not going to be the things that I expect. Employees brought up things like focus and direction. That's what they're looking for. But you're going to mention things like open space, capital improvement, tax rates, things like that. Those are bigger questions. Those are bigger issues, and they're harder to deal with, and they're more general, harder to put words to and get specific about. So that's the whole big picture. I didn't know if there would be papers here tonight, so what I did is I took some papers here from the prior meeting, and I'm going to point out that in here is an email address. So if you say some things tonight, but you got other things you want to say, and you don't want to put your hand up and say them, it's okay. We have an email address. You send them there. What we do, and I've got it right here in writing so you can hold me to it, is we take it, you send it in, and then without the office takes this information and they cut and paste it into a Dropbox for us to look at without names and addresses, so we don't know who's sending it in. And that's not the important thing. We want the information. So it essentially becomes anonymous by the time it gets to us. We will still get whatever it is that's on your mind. You can send us emails, in other words. Specific email and address for just this town. And I'll hand these out at some point. So the only other thing I want to say is that Bob is here tonight. Bob has met the selectmen. Bob has been reading the correspondence. Yes, I've been more visual here in town coming in, but Bob is just a great recruiter. I mean, he's the best. And so he's here because he needs to get the first-hand feel of what I've been telling him, And you know, he's going to be talking to a lot of, he'll tell you the secret, he's already talking to candidates. And so, what you say tonight, I don't want you to be shy, I don't want you to be on your best behavior or your worst behavior. I just want you to talk about what your hopes and dreams of the town are. And what your hopes and dreams for the next town, you know, your first. Let me say that again, your first town administrator are. And maybe we can talk about those things. And this guy needs to hear it as much as I do. And that's why he's here. Bob, you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you,
While I do
Steve.
this?
I'm the younger brother of Steve, in case you haven't noticed that, but, no, I'm Bob Mercier. I've been with MRI since I retired out of Burlington, Massachusetts. I was the town manager in Burlington, Massachusetts, for the majority of my career. I also spent time in Billerica as the town manager. Two big towns, what we would consider the big towns. But I started my career way back when, don't ask me when, but way back when, in Maynard. I was their first town administrator at the time. Actually was an executive secretary at the time, and they ultimately, as a community, evolved into a town manager spot. Not while I was there, I had left them, but that was where I really got my start. And after I retired, I did a part-time stint, short-term stint in Wayland, Massachusetts, and I've done a part-time stint in Boxborough, which is community right nearby. And interestingly enough, while I was in Boxborough, they were going through the change of government. They were talking about creating a town administrator. They subsequently have done that, but they were going through this type of engagement with their residents about creating the position and why the necessity of it, why it was important, all of that stuff. So I've got a pretty good experience in terms of municipal government. All of my career has been spent here in Massachusetts. I live in Tingsboro, so it's a pretty short jaunt for me to get here pretty easily. And I've known this area for quite some time, and I know the area in general because this is where I've lived, brought up my kids, all of that stuff. So this is a joy for me, a joy for us as MRI, to try to help you folks get the right candidate. To that end, I think Steve alluded to it. Look, there's a period of time for 30 days we normally do for the advertisements to go wherever we're going to decide to put that advertisement in, and Steve is working with the selectmen on that. But that doesn't mean we're doing nothing during those 30 days. We, and I say myself, Steve, one of the other retired managers here in Massachusetts who's done a lot of work with us, he's doing work with me right now, we're in Concord doing that search, is Buzz Stapczynski. He's the retired manager out of Andover, and he served a long stint in Wilmington, but his majority of his career was in Andover. So Steve, myself, and Buzz are the Massachusetts managers who do the work for MRI. MRI, I think you know, does a heck of a lot of work up in New Hampshire, in Maine, in Rhode Island. I've done the Westerly, Rhode Island, and Portsmouth, Rhode Island searches. So we I think you know that, the selectmen know it, we're all over New England. So, but Massachusetts is incredibly important to us, especially Steve and I and Buzz. This is where we made our careers. And we think we get it, albeit when you go into different communities, there's always something different about each community that we learn, which is what Steve is learning from the meetings he's had here, which I hope I'm going to learn a little bit about. And to that end, in terms of what we do as we prep for this, again, Steve has kept me involved in all of the discussions you've had with him. I've seen all the emails. I talked to a potential candidate at 4 o'clock tonight. Very interesting individual. I said, we haven't even advertised yet, but it's just somebody we've known that we think might be a good fit. I'm not convinced of that yet, because I got to hear more, but could be a very interesting person. He is not the only one. There's a couple more that we've put the feelers out to. So before you're advertising, we're already starting to build the type of candidate that we think may be able to fit here. So that's all going on now. So it's all part of our process. It's the way we do things. And we've been fairly successful at it. Replacements, I've been doing these searches for 5 years. Any one of the towns I've been in, the candidate that was selected is still there. Now, that's not a guarantee, but that says something, I think, about the homework we do to make the right fit work, not for us, for you. And that's that sort of background work we do. And it doesn't behoove us to have anybody fail, nor does it behoove you as a client to have anybody fail. So it's very important for us to do that sort of background work before we recommend people to you for your interviews and the search committee, and then ultimately to the appointing authority. So, we good?
Did you mention the decaf?
The decaf coffee?
Yeah.
Did you have it here? Because I might need it.
We have decaf, we have regular,
Yeah.
and we're done. You know, we've done our part. What do you want us to know? What I got an email from a Mr. Westerling, and it was so funny because you broke all the rules. I got your email. I just told everybody it was going to be anonymous, but it was such a professional email. It had 4 attachments. It talked about capital improvement. It talked about the bylaw. And so Liz put it right through. She said, you know, this guy wants you to know about the bylaws and stuff. I think you should know about them. So I wrote him back and I said, you're going to come to the meeting? He said, sure. And I said, well, whatever you got to say, you should have everybody else hear it, because you realize we had a saying where I worked, well, you know, when the secretary retired, they forget there are 3 of them and only 1 of you. That's talking about the Board of Selectmen. The Selectmen sometimes forget there's 3 of them calling and trying to get through at the same time. And when the boards are looking to talk to the administrator, they sometimes forget that there are other boards also. And so my point with asking Mr. Westerling to come and speak tonight was for other people to know that there are other committees vying for the same amount of time. And I think it's important for everybody to hear everybody else's concerns. How would you like to be first?
I guess, you know, everyone, I could be first. The reason I sent something to you, because Capital Planning Committee is a fairly new committee in town. And we used to be done by an ad hoc committee of town department heads and things like that. It wasn't an official committee, but it was, it worked pretty well, and the treasurer was there. But the information wasn't widely disseminated. But I wasn't here at that time, so they did a great job. But there was an issue a few years ago on town meeting floor. I was just a new citizen in town, and it was on a piece of land next to the school. And it was about, I don't know, 12 acres of land. I'm not quite sure of all the details, but it was for sale at a reasonable price, and it was 12 acres of level land. But, and it was ready to be passed. I think most people wanted it, but someone got up and asked them, has it been assessed? Is there an assessed value or appraised value? And the answer was no. We're not. Well, how'd you arrive at the price? And I thought it was a really reasonable price for 12 acres of land in Berlin. But that, enough people were swayed by that, saying it should have been appraised. So it failed. And to me, that was just an indication of poor planning. And land is part of capital, and it should have been better than that. So I did some research on capital planning, and most towns in Massachusetts have a capital planning committee.
True.
And there's enabling legislation for capital planning committees in the Massachusetts general laws. And so we got a few of us looked at the regulations or the enabling legislation, and we took their guidelines. And it's part of their guidelines. This is the Department of Revenue, included how to write a bylaw for a capital planning committee. And this was about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago now that we started. And we drafted a bylaw based on those guidelines, and then we looked at other towns in Massachusetts that had similar bylaws. And those, Townsend was one of them, Dudley, Douglas, or some towns in the Blackstone Valley. We took all of that, we came up with some draft bylaws, and then we circulated them among selectmen and anyone who wanted to look at them. One person is in the room right now Lynn Ryan is in the room.
It must be this person that flinched.
This person
Yeah.
and others. And we got really good comments back, and that's how we kind of tailored it. We didn't have a town administrator, and so we tailored it to other towns that didn't have a town administrator. And we did the best we could. And so we've been we've gone through two budget cycles. Myself, I have some experience in municipal finance, but the others on the committee are new, if you will. This is their first time through it. And so they're a little bit at a disadvantage. So we went slowly, and we've had now the second capital plan that we've produced. And it's a reasonable target of spending, and we have a 5-year running capital plan now. For what it's worth, we have a 5-year, and now we have 2 years of it. So over the next few years, we would build it. But there's a second set of processes for a town administrator, and that's what I sent to you.
Yes.
It's an appendix on one of the Department of Revenue, and the town administrator actually acts as a sort of like a filter between the department heads and the capital planning committee and the selectmen. And it just works a lot better with the town administrator. The cycle starts earlier in the year. It starts in August rather than, we started late this year. It was a little bit late when we had our budget kickoff. And so it would start in August, and it just lays it out in a cleaner fashion. And so any troubles we're having this year, I think will pass if we have a town administrator. So it's just one additional thing that the town administrator would have to do. But this is the Department of Revenue for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts saying this is how it should be done. So I'm just looking forward to what other people have comments about our budget process. I wish someone from the Finance Committee was here, because the Finance Committee actually takes the capital planning and then the requests from the department heads, then starts looking at available funding from the revenue side through the assessors and so forth. And at the end, they come up and they actually, after town meeting, set the tax rate.
Yeah, that's a good
So
recap.
it's a large process, but if anyone wants to comment on that budget process, or what some of the problems are, I'd be happy to hear those. And I think the town administrator should, the candidates should know where we sit on that process, I think.
Well, they will, because of the information you sent. And they'll also know the quote that I just got from you, just one additional thing. I happened to write that down, I liked that. It's just one additional.
It's one additional thing.
It's an automatic part, it's almost a continuous part of a budget process.
Right.
So it's not going to be seen as one additional thing, it's just a normal part. Right, June? I mean, it's going to be part of a budget process. You've got to know that. And I noticed your debt service is kind of like, just drops right off. You don't have a heavy burden of debt service, so.
The people who have preceded us in that committee that didn't, it's yeoman's work. We're like, we have one of the lowest tax rates around. And
We'll keep that quiet.
And the debt is really low
Yeah.
for a town this size. And I think that's, credit to the people who have preceded us.
Well, you have some neat things going on. I mean, you've got some interesting funding sources going on. I mean, it's the things that I've been learning are just make it fun and interesting. It's a nice challenge for somebody who wants to come in and work with that budget. Is there anyone else? Lynn, you don't want to be pointed out or anything, do you?
No.
Anything on your mind?
I do have a couple of things that are important to me.
Good.
To remember that the individual is going to be the face of the town to most people.
Oh, good.
So they have to have good interpersonal skills. And that's somewhat of an intangible, but I have a feeling you folks can figure that out. They need to be articulate and have good writing skills.
Yeah.
There's nothing like receiving a poorly written note from the person you feel is the town. Massachusetts experience. I know you're all over New England, but it's very difficult to transplant someone from New Hampshire to Massachusetts who's not familiar with all the intricacies and the laws and so forth.
Yep.
Somewhat tech savvy, and I don't mean they need to be an IT person, but they have to have some software familiarity, and particularly it would be helpful if they knew the software that we use. In education, and I don't mean a PhD, because sometimes I think they can dream of it, but they can't do it. I'm looking for someone who's taken the opportunity to avail themselves of educational opportunities that are available to them
Well, we're done for the night.
in the
That's a good list.
classes.
That's excellent.
Wow.
Can I comment, Steve?
That's
Just briefly,
wonderful.
Lynn, you bring
Wow.
up a point that's pretty near and dear to us, and we try to sell to the appointing authorities how necessary it is, and we get pushback from potential customers, if you will, on our requirement to have the writing sample done, the essays, and then respond to the type of questions
Yeah.
we're asking.
Yeah.
It's incredibly important, and you just touched on it, it's incredibly important, in my mind, I was an administrator, I was a manager, so was Steve, for the appointing authority to know that the person they ultimately hire can actually write. It's amazing how, and you talked about the education, it's amazing how, and I can say this because I think you all have experienced it, it's amazing how educated some people are, but they don't know how to write. And that's, if you're communicating with residents in the community, you better know how to express yourself and write and do those type of things. It's almost a lost art in a lot of places. But we see some incredibly intelligent people that come to us with their resumes, and we either get on the phone or we have them do the essays, and you're like, really? Really? You may be a good manager and all that kind of stuff, but a manager in a community where you're face-to-face with residents all the time, you're always responding to residents, and not just through email, but sometimes actually through a written letter. So we find it to be an important trait that we think is valuable in our criteria to evaluate, and we certainly think it's important to the appointing authority to see that. And they will get it before the interviews. They'll get all that information, so.
And your selectmen read, by the way. I've been sending them stuff, and
Just
they've been
one other
reading.
thing about contracts, the person that you would be considering, or the group of people that you would be considering, most of them are not going to conveniently have a contract somewhere else or in another field that conveniently ends July 1st. And usually written into most contracts, you have to give 120 days notice or something like that. How do you anticipate handling that?
No, Alan negotiates, Alan is our boss, if you will, and has done a lot of these things. He'll take the lead on the contract negotiations for Berlin, will he?
Yeah, and I think, Lynn, from our perspective, you're right. I had in my contract, I'd give a 90-day notice to the appointing authority if I was going to leave. But if the relationship is good, and in a lot of cases the relationship is good, I'll give you a perfect example. Jim Beloy, who's now the new manager in Lexington, came from Westboro. Solid in Westboro, had no issues in Westboro, just saw it as a real step up by going to Lexington, and I think he hopes to retire out of Lexington. He gave a 4-week notice. He had a much longer notification period, but the selectmen understood. They said, okay, if you're gonna go, then you take the 4 weeks, give us notice, and we're gonna, they had, it's a bigger situation, they had an assistant town manager, so that person could fill in and all that kind of stuff. So it varies. Some have that 120, some have 90, some can talk to their appointing authority about leaving earlier. Depending on who the candidate is, we'll have to work that issue out with you guys.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Tim Wysocki. I'm also on the Energy Committee, and one of the things that I heard
Yeah.
in your opening statement that concerned me was that you were discussing the fit with the select board. And what I didn't hear from you is the skills that this individual would bring as a manager. And when you said the previous session, how you were kind of talking to the department heads and that kind of thing, it felt like you were more interested in hearing from what we have to say and the select board has to say than what the career employees have to say. And honestly, the select board comes and goes, but the employees are the heart of the town. And I want you to address that. What do you look for in a people manager to support our department heads and our career employees?
Well, the difference between the two meetings is what I was trying to address, and I want to make this group feel special. I mean, last group was a public one, so people from the public could come, but it was essentially a daytime employee type of meeting. And so we heard the concerns of, we need somebody's going to give us focus. When they ask for a budget request, we need specific directions. It can't be general English language. We want to hear things like 0, 2%, 3%. Something concrete we can respond to when we submit a budget, those types of things. So I got a lot of good feedback already at that level. When someone comes in who's not on a committee, like Steve, who's just a citizen coming in, I love that word, and doesn't have a particular issue that has bothered them, in their office for the year, it's often a more general issue, and that's what I was trying to elicit tonight, so that we're going away with impressions of what people care about in the town, and usually what they care about and what I've been hearing, and I don't want to lead the thought out of someone that might be going to say it, but land sounds really important here, open space, caretaking the land and those things, and
With
so.
all due respect, I think good governance is important to town too. And
I think we've checked that box, but you wouldn't know that, but yeah.
But it's a pretty straightforward question. What are you guys looking for in leadership? What kind of manager are you going to install as our first town administrator?
Well, I'll take a first whack, and I'll let Bob take a second whack. First, we're looking for ethical person. And I'll pause, and I'll take a few extra seconds, because that's the reason I'm doing this right now. I came in an era when the big talkers were the managers. And they were just more like salespersons, and they didn't have any technical skills to do any budgets or anything. And they weren't good writers, they just knew how to talk, and it bothered me terrible. And they didn't mind playing with the gray areas. And I just wanted people that first were ethical, and second, they knew how to put a budget together. They understood what a 3-year cycle, they understood what the overlays were, the free cash were in a cycle, and how it all worked together. Those were the things that I wanted to see in the managers coming through, whatever the title. And so, I've talked about the hopes that I have for Berlin, knowing that we're not going to achieve all those things. But because you've asked for them, I would love to see somebody that has come from a smaller town situation that's been forced to work with assessing, maybe worked with the highway, maybe worked with police and fire, a veterans agent, and done some town clerk work, and worked for a board of selectmen in a lower capacity. That's my background. I did all those things. I was a treasurer and collector. I did all those things, and boy, oh boy, I'm telling you, it was the right thing to have to walk into a job like this in a town like this size. Worked great, because I understood when people came to me what they were talking about. There was just nothing better. Do I think we're going to find candidates like that in today's world? No, but do I think we're going to find pieces of that? Yes. And so in addition to those things, I'm thinking, it might be nice to have someone with planning skills. 30B, maybe a few, your police chief is a techie person here, an IT person, right? So you're combining jobs right now. Your accounting person is an HR person right now. So you're combining right now, right?
I understand.
So we're going to find somebody that maybe has a few combinations that you don't have now. And I've listed 5, 7 of these that are potential skill sets. And so I'm saying it for Bob's benefit too, because these are things that I've learned that you got pieces of now, but you got some other pieces you don't have. So of all those things I've listed, I'd like to see some of those.
I think, Jim, from my perspective, some of the things I'm interested in what you just
It's
commented
Tim,
on.
by the way.
Is it Tim? I'm sorry. You talked about some personal characteristics, I think, which we tend to look for in those successful candidates. We constantly hear about the leadership qualities of an individual. And you can take that a number of ways. You're all probably in the private sector also. And you know bosses or leaders that are good. You know some who are not so good. And a lot of it depends on who that person is and how they relate to their employees. So we've heard things in all of our communities about, we all want a leader. We all want, somebody here mentioned about the face of the community. We all want a leader who we can trust, who we can feel confident in, who, and this is a constant theme, who has our backs. because I think you said it, there are a lot of people who do a lot of good work here. And they want somebody who's going to recognize that, who's going to come in here and say, you know, I got your back, just do your job, and we're going to move the community forward and all that kind of stuff. That's a personal thing. There are some managers that Steve and I know who are, well, they manage in a style, and some communities need it, where they tear down what's in place, because they have to. The place is dysfunctional. That's not what you are. You're going to need a leader who comes here, is a collaborative type of individual. It's a small town. You've got a lot of people who are doing good work, and they don't need somebody to watch them, micromanage them, and do that kind of stuff. They need a leader that they can trust, they can count on, that'll take them and the community forward. That's a hard thing to find, but we think we do a pretty good job at it. But those are the type of personal characteristics that we kind of weed our way through, and Steve's gotten a lot of information from you, and I'm now getting a lot of it, which is interesting to us. And as we identify those candidates we want to talk to, that's all in the back of our minds as to what you folks have all told us is important to make it all work here.
Well, now it's time to turn it around. Are you looking for some specific skills?
I'll yield the floor after this, but I just wanted to add a couple of things
Yeah.
that I hope that you take away. I hope that you find a leader that is a mentor, not somebody who is specifically going to say my way or the highway, but is trying to build up the organization.
Yeah.
That's very important. I want someone who isn't just managing up, but is also effectively managing down, that they realize that they're setting the tone for the organization, and that the way that they're going to lead is going to affect the employees that are looking to them for their guidance.
Well, don't yield just yet. Specifically, are there certain skill sets that you are hoping for?
Yes, so.
I saw your name and I saw your energy report, the town report, so I knew
I'm looking for
that you were associated with
an
energy.
individual who is articulate. The ethics are important to me, okay? That they're going to stand up for people, that they're not necessarily going to back down when they know they're right. Even if they're potentially wrong, they have to be open. They have to listen. They have to communicate. They have to have, one of the sayings we have is you can't be an alligator, okay? Your mouth can't be bigger than your ears, okay? So this is something that is crucially important, that you've got to listen, because we have a strong team of career employees. They know what they're doing, but they could benefit from a unifying force. They could benefit from clear instruction. They could benefit from guidance, mentoring, and someone who's going to listen to them and empower them to make the changes that maybe they haven't felt they've been able to do in the past. That's what I'm looking for in a leader.
Wow. Okay, that's great.
It's good stuff.
I think one of the
Whoops,
most
then you.
difficult things that the manager's going to have to do is probably write job descriptions. They're going to have to evaluate the people that work for them or the people that are under them. In order to do that, they got to have job descriptions. If they have job descriptions, they're going to start weeding out people have assumed duties that they can handle or that they're good at, but they might not be consistent with an ideal job description that fits in with someone else's job description. That's hard to do, particularly without annoying people. You have to respect their intelligence and their willingness to change,
Yeah.
but that's a hard one.
You know, when you do this, like we're doing, you bump and you see different things, and you try not to get too involved and still make good comments to benefit the town. And you do have job descriptions here. And you also have a grant that's coming your way to update job descriptions and do a number of other personnel things that Chris informed me about. But your job descriptions can be written in such a way that protect the town more. They're not up-to-date job descriptions in terms of protecting the town more, in terms of delineating, in terms of physical requirements of what, some jobs a person shouldn't be doing if they don't have the capacity to do, physical strengths and seeing all those boring details. And the essential functions need to be laid out for a job description so that you know what's an essential function that has to be performed. And if you can't perform it, you shouldn't have that job. It's going to be a difficult situation in this town when you have these combined jobs. First off, you've got a lot of part-time jobs. You've got 10-hour jobs here, part-time jobs, and they do multiple functions. Going to be a real challenge to get these job descriptions to shape up and show exactly reflect what happens here. It's going to be very interesting. So you're absolutely right. It's going to be a lot of fun. I've done them before. It'll be a lot of fun. Bill, is that right?
Yeah. One of the things that bothered me was the ideal candidate profile statement of progressive responsibilities in a nonprofit organization. Now, if you go up further, it gets contradicted where it says must have a general knowledge in all facets of small town management. I don't see where anybody from a nonprofit organization would have those skills. As we went through this process, we talked to town administrators and department heads, and they all were essentially unanimous in that we should hire someone who has been a town administrator. They're going to have a big enough job to do coming in here as a first administrator. They should not have to learn how to be one before they get here. So the fact of hiring somebody from a nonprofit organization, I think, is totally off base.
Good for you. Good for you. I think that is part of the process that we've gone through in learning about your town. I think first impressions were a 3,000 population town going to have trouble attracting an experienced person. Is that fair to say for us?
That's fair. Yeah.
And I think that we have adjusted since then to a very different profile in our minds of who the candidate are. In fact, I think it was Lisa's comments that took those words out, so that's no longer in there.
I took all of your comments, I just didn't have a chance to send it over, but I took all of your comments and Wayne's comments and adjusted the.
Well, credit's now appropriately given.
Yes.
So that is now out of there.
So that's
Yeah.
out of there.
And-
And the other comments that you guys made were also incorporated.
So I'm the primary author of that document, and I take responsibility for putting that in there in the first place. In fact, I had even broader language in there in the first place, because I didn't know. I didn't know whether we were going to be really wide open. Were we going to get military school applicants out of state? Big, broad, open arm type of thing. And as time's gone on, it's become more narrow and narrow. And I'm hoping Bob's going to nod his head when I say, I think that we're going to do all right here. I think we're going to get applicants that might meet the profile you're talking about and might be good candidates and going to be just what you're looking for.
Well, you've also done some things, and I know it's got to go to town meeting, but you've done some things with the salary which will make it attractive
Yeah,
to
very important.
some people. The further you get close to the ocean, the salaries are pretty high up.
Really.
You're almost in the middle part of the state, and you've got a lot of folks around you who may be interested in coming based on what you guys are thinking about in terms of salary. The other thing I'll say about the position itself, and what, Bill, you and your committee created, first one in, and there is trepidation out there from an established manager about being the first one in, because sometimes that goes sideways real quick. I was the first one in a couple of the communities, and I'll say this, when I got there, the selectmen weren't quite sure what their role remained and what the administrator was taking over. And at times, there are clashes with that. And it's a difficult time frame. It's a difficult time for a person to come in. If they're an established town administrator somewhere, and you say, but come to us because we're attractive, this is your opportunity to put a stamp on creating this position. That is a two-way street. It's not only the manager coming in or the administrator coming in, it's also the political wherewithal to allow that person to do the job. So my point in all of that is, albeit you have done the right thing in terms of salaries, there will be some people who are comfortable where they are and are leery, I'll leave it at that, leery about the type of thing that you guys are talking about. First-time creator, it's a strong position, according to what you passed. Is that person, and I can't answer the question, is that person going to be allowed to do the job when they come here? And we've seen it both ways. Some communities embrace the change and really want it to happen, put their arms around the individual, and that person takes that community to the next level. Sometimes it gets dicey. And through nobody's fault, it's just that the expectations on both sides weren't fully understood when the position was created. So that's part of our job. We got to filter through that with the candidates and make sure they understand and they're ready for what we call a challenge and an opportunity in Berlin, because that's what it is. It's a challenge, but it's a real opportunity. So.
Yeah,
And before I ask you, I want to put Bud's comments in a context that I want to respond on. It's a strong. I've got the document here. The bill that just passed that creates the position. It's a strong document in terms of breadth. It's a wide-ranging document. It's a town-wide perspective for a town administrator position. That's what's strong about
It
it.
says the document that you wrote or the bylaw?
No, the one that you
You guys
folks
passed.
passed at your
Okay.
town meeting, that your state legislature passed,
Yep.
and is now coming back to be the primary document that gives authority to this position. The breadth is there, wide-ranging. However, it is not a strong document in terms of being an independent authority within the town.
Right.
It is a part of the Board of Selectmen's duties in almost every respect. So, and this position works with the Board of Selectmen. It does not work independently of the Board of Selectmen, with two exceptions, and I don't need to get into it. But 30B, procurement officer, is a separate function, not under the Selectmen directly, but the breadth is the strong part. But it is not separate from the board, which is why I emphasized, Tim, that group thing that's got to happen with the board if it's to be successful here, because it cannot work independently of the board and be successful anywhere. Yes, sir.
So I'm Wayne Texera, and I'm one of the 5 members that was part of the committee that developed that.
You were?
Yeah,
Good.
so what I would like to say is that what you just said is no surprise to us who created it, and probably shouldn't be a surprise to the select board or anyone else, because we created the position. So I don't know what your expectation would have been reading it, but we did a lot of research on what's the difference between a town manager and what's the difference between a town administrator. And there's a reason that Berlin is one of only 26 communities in Massachusetts that doesn't have one, and that's because the town is very concerned about somebody with you guys made mention of somebody that has a lot of power and comes in and tells everybody what to do and runs roughshod over people. So, in writing that to make sense to the town, make sense to the employees, it was written that it does take direction. But we also wrote it with the specifics that, it's really clear that the select board's role is to be policy setting and oversight, and that there is teeth, I would say, in the sense that, they have to get things approved by the Board of Selectmen, but it's really clear that they act independently from the Board of Selectmen and can make decisions based on the guidelines set by the Board of Selectmen. So I do think.
Oh, that's good. That's
So-
good. That's a
so,
nice
I think
way of putting it.
I think that's in the bylaw. If there's intent that's, I think, a question, then I think our committee knows that, and I think the select board knows that as well. Because we did go back and forth with that, and any members of the employees know that, because that's how we presented it at town meeting. So I think that, it's very clear that it's not a position that's gutted. It's not a position that has no power, because we've seen ones in other towns where basically the select board likes to run power plays, and they, as you said, they destroy this position. We're all very aware that the first person that comes in, and I think the select board knows that, it's important for them to work well with them, because if it is a dysfunctional relationship, then that's going to hurt us going back out, because the word will then be on the street that Berlin's a dysfunctional town
Right.
to work with.
Yeah, true.
So I don't think that's the goal. But I think that, the roles of finance are really important. That came across really clear. I mean, the town really needs an administrator. I mean, the collective experience of our 3 board members as selectmen is about 6 years. So I think the reason that, as we proposed this position and worked on behalf of the town to create the position, was that, we want somebody that's gonna stay and be the institutional memory and experience for the town. Because, people that are coming in that have, certainly in some cases, have had experience on other boards, within town, and definitely have experience, that's great. But there are people that come on that have no experience, and so they're learning on the job as an elected official. So it's not fair we really said, I think, if you go back and read some of the, I don't know if all the material was in there, but we said, it's really not fair for people to serve on a select board and other town committees to, for anybody to elect them and feel that they are gonna have the knowledge and experience to be successful in doing that. And that's why we need to hire somebody that has that professional experience to help guide the Board of Selectmen. The Select Board still, I think, based on the way the bylaw is written, is really clear. They have the policy, the direction, they know what's important. They'll continue to set whatever the rules are that this person should be focused on. But I don't think anybody wants to see a town, I don't think the Select Board wants that, but I know I wouldn't, and I think that was the feeling of the committee, that we don't want somebody that's just gonna never do anything except for what the Select Board, tasks them to do.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
they may not, the Select Board, if they're all new, may not know they're about to step into a landmine. I mean, the initial example of what happened, that we now have a horrible, development potentially going on is because it wasn't thought through, because people don't have time. So the whole point of this role is to, create as a full-time paid position, do the stuff that a part-time Board of Selectmen, is able to do. I mean, we're really fortunate that 2 members of the Board of Selectmen are available, during the day, but there could be a time where you've got, 3 board members, select board members that all have full-time jobs and aren't able to be here.
Yeah, that
So
could
that's why
happen.
the position was created. So I think that it's very clear that they need to have the finance experience, they need to have the HR experience, because we don't have that. The reason that there are jobs that have multiple tasks isn't necessarily by design, but by necessity, because we haven't had the skill. So I think it's, this person could come in and recommend to the Board of Selectmen that, like, this structure isn't necessarily working, and talk about that. So I think it has to be somebody that's an independent thinker. I think you were really right, I'm sorry, I forgot your first name.
Bob.
Bob, that, it's a double-edged sword, but I think that the town, and I think that's something that your role should be in, talking with the Select Board and helping to flesh out where they're at for sure, but those personalities can change. And I think it's, we want that to function, but I don't think that anybody who worked on this committee, or the town, or the employees, or anybody who had the feedback, wants that to just be a subservient position to the Selectmen. That's not, if that's how you read that bylaw, I think you read it wrong. Because it's definitely a position that's, it's not a power-hungry position, and we could have made it stronger, but we did that with the respect to the townspeople. There's a lot of soft skills, which you guys are talking a lot about, which I think are important for the position to be successful, and we purposefully didn't write a lot of that stuff in, because we wanted the position in the Select Board to have room to breathe, to find the right person with the right skill set and things like that. But it's very clear that, they have the authority and are expected to help manage the budgeting process, to help make things happen in town. And it's not that it's a position that doesn't have the authority to act, because we knew that would, we know that the more power somebody in the position has, the better it is for the town, but we have to start somewhere.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that it's just really important that whoever's hired in that discussion that happens, and that's an important conversation, I think, to have happen during an interview process or through your committee, the selecting committee, that they understand that that's really important. I mean, we spent a lot of time convincing and talking to the other boards about, Finance Committee runs really well. It's run a really great job, but they can't fill the positions necessarily.
Right.
There's always holes in that
yeah.
committee, because they're having to do so much work.
Yeah.
And so that's the role of a town administrator, to take on
Yeah, it
the
is.
weight and give the structure, and like you were saying, that the employees wanted. They want to know, like, what's the percentages, so it's not this game of back and forth. It just runs more efficiently. So maybe I said too much, but I just definitely think that's.
Oh, this is great.
That's the tone. I mean,
Yep.
if you don't know what you think the position needs to be from a technical standpoint, go back and read what was passed, because it was passed for that on a very specific reason, because we do respect the select board and their
Yep.
power, and we wanted to outlay it. A lot of the towns that we looked at when we did the bylaws did put that stuff in. And we did because it's important to the committee to say, this is their role, this is this
yep.
person's role.
Yep.
And
This
and
is
that's why
great.
it's defined, because
This is great.
we've saw in other towns what happens when there are those power plays. So, yeah, they still have to
Yeah.
report to them, and that was important to make the select board feel comfortable as well, that they have control over what this person does in defining their job and their role and how they measure their performance. But at the same time, it's like this person needs to step up because we don't know everything we need to know. That's why we don't want a newbie, as Bill said. That's why we made the recommendation for the salary to be there. I mean, we're like a unicorn. We're this 3,000 person town in the middle of all this growth. So we're not like a little bumpkin town out, no offense to any of those
Yeah.
small towns, out in the western part of the state, but they don't have the issues that Berlin has.
Yeah.
So, I think we should be able to attract a good candidate, but if they do their research and know the town, I mean, there are great people here. The select board's committed, the finance committee, there's great people, but, there's a lot of people that have a lot of institutional experience that are rolling off a lot of these committees, and we need somebody on board that can
Yep.
help make sure you can't play, it's too complex in government to be playing without experience, and that's why we created it, so.
Well, I want to tell you, I've been hoping somehow in this process to bump into this committee, this committee, because,
I haven't talked yet.
well, I basically served in one town for 25 years, and I started like an executive secretary, and I graduated into a town administrator, and then I finally was a town manager. So I had 3 different jobs in the same town, the same whatever, and I served with over 20 selectmen, and, I just graduated through the whole process. And so I understand this document. I've helped write these documents, and if you noticed, when the final document came out of the state government, they labeled it Selectmen Administrator Act.
Yep.
Did you notice that? Yeah. And that was the correct title for that.
And I just
And
want to add one
it
other
was-
thing too, is that, we've seen the hiring processes in other towns, and part of the reason it's very specific about there being a committee and things like that is,
Yes.
the townspeople were really concerned about, sweetheart deal, that somebody just gets put in the back door and now they're the town administrator. I mean, we don't want that to happen. I mean, we want there to be a
Yeah,
clear
that's not
process,
gonna
and we want
happen
to make
here,
sure
no.
that you guys,
Right, I can see.
as the consultant that's hired, is coaching the people that are on that board to maintain the confidentiality and all
Oh,
those
yeah.
other things.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just think that's really important.
No, you've
We spent
done a
18
great
months
job so
thinking
far.
this through. We
Yeah.
read a lot, we talked to a lot of people. All the people in town were, that are on the boards, and even residents were really involved. So, I mean, it was an extremely well thought out process.
Well, I want
It just
to
happened.
at least comfort you. When we did our interview with the board, one of the things that I touched on was the construction of the search committee, because you call it something different here. It's called the hiring committee. In your act, you called it the hiring committee, and you included an employee as a requirement. It doesn't matter what the title of the committee is. The town and the selectmen could call it a search committee. It really didn't matter. But, it was clearly stated it had to be an employee. And so when we interviewed with the selectmen, I was gently trying to find out, is there an employee on it? I wanted not to start off on the wrong foot, And I found out there was an employee on the committee. So check the box. Okay, we're following the act. That's good. And we'll follow the act right through. So this is a wonderful document to start off with the position. So
It
it's
is.
going to work out
Yep.
well. I mean, you've
Yep.
done, the first impression is not, that's why Bob's job is so important. And I do it too. I've talked to a couple of people, but he's the master. And, the first impression, Berlin, small town, open fields, is so much more complex than that. And so what you've done us a great favor by giving us this document, by giving us a salary we can work with. And, I think you said you didn't have a chance to talk.
I wanted to hear what other people had to say. Beth Stores, I was also
Hi, Beth.
on the committee. I'm really proud of that special act. I think we did a really good job.
Yes, you did. Congratulations. I agree.
And I think one of the best pieces about that document is the balance between all of the various entities within the town. And we really tried to write it to institutionalize collaboration and balance of power across, across the entire structure. That was really important, as we talk to employees of the town, volunteers of the town, the select board, that working together, that collaboration, that collegiality, that two-way street. We really wanted to get across the point that we're looking for somebody to help, to bring us to the next level. As Wayne says, we've reached that point. I mean, we're a $14 million corporation on the back of volunteers. And that's not reasonable.
That's it.
I mean, the fact we are functional as a town is based on the quality of the people we have here, how much they love this town, the amount of work and effort they've put in to bring us to this place. And we're looking for somebody to bring us to the next level by not being an alligator.
Yeah, that's
by
a new
being
one.
able to work with people who have all kinds of experiences and 50-plus years of experience in this town. That institutional knowledge that we're in danger of losing is really important. And the important, really, really, really important piece, I don't know how many people have said to me, well, you know, I would be interested in getting involved, but it's so much work, and
Yes.
I don't know anything about
Yeah.
X, Y,
Yep,
and Z.
yep.
And when we can point out there is a professional who knows this stuff, who can help,
Yeah.
and you're not just put out there on your own when you sit in on a committee meeting and they make you a member because you've come to 2 meetings, you know, and suddenly you're making decisions about open space, you know, really
Yeah,
bringing people in on a proper onboarding procedure, you know, opening up. In some ways, you know, people have done such a great job that there are a lot of people kind of like, well, you know, hey, it's great. Why do we need a town administrator? Everything's running just fine.
yeah.
And if you don't spend a lot of time here, and if you're not on any boards or committees, you don't see the rough spots and the places
Yeah.
where if there was somebody who was paying attention to the entire picture and knew
Yeah,
that these people over here are talking about something that's really relevant to these decisions that are being made over here, somebody who can make those connections.
yeah.
One of the, I think maybe it was Wayne who had the image, talked about a spider in the middle of a spider web. Just somebody who's got all that information, all that knowledge. They just know what's going on.
Yeah, and you did that.
Right.
And they're not in control of it necessarily, but it's a flow of information. It's connecting people with each other, with information, with ideas, with resources to move Berlin forward. 2 very specific points that nobody's brought up. Specifically volunteers. We have great town employees, they need the support of a professional town administrator. Our volunteer boards, our volunteers need that exact same type of support and
Yep.
development. And project management is a huge hole.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Currently, to get things done, somebody takes a project and goes and does it. For better or for worse, as
Okay.
well as they can. And sometimes that might cost the town more and be less efficient than if we had somebody who could help them
Yeah.
do that. We need somebody to see the big picture, and when we are building new libraries, reconstructing historical buildings, putting space for firefighters to sleep, whatever it is, somebody who can be involved in that process all the way through and have enough information about the rules, the regs, the history, to help get these projects done successfully in a timely manner, efficiently, effectively.
Well, that was a shot in the dark in the profile, but that got picked up on. Yeah. Well, I want you folks, the last 3 that spoke, with such passion. It was wonderful. I want you to be proud of something, because I've been testing your document with reality questions when I was asking, like when the town administrator goes and asks assessment, okay, what's the overlay surplus this year? You know, an actual part of the budgeting process that needs to take place, really as a kickoff, start of the thing. And Eloise is there, yeah, no problem, come ask me, whatever, The responses to those specific types of examples I was throwing out can be negative, can be no response. And then I was playing it up both ways. Okay, no response. Okay, is that a board-to-board thing? What's the town administrator got to do now? Is this now a policy issue between two boards? Is the board going to go, see if you can take care of it? We're tired of fighting with the assessors. I'm testing all these things, trying to find out what this town is like, how it works, how it's going to respond to this type of new environment that's going to be created with the town administrator. You guys are doing great. I'm feeding Bob this glorious little, what did I call it? Little paradise thing,
Yes.
Where's the trouble in paradise? And you guys are doing great.
I think that you did
because
say that, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he comes from Maine, or
Almost paradise is right.
But you're pulling this all together for me now. This conversation is pulled because I'm probing these things, and I'm talking to the selectmen, and and I want to tell you from my viewpoint, I'm talking to the selectmen, and I'm seeing, as a first-time town administrator, I learned a lot from my first board, but I'm sitting here thinking, it's first-time town administrator, I'm feeding Bob. Okay, one member of the board is multi-generational, goes back. Okay, that's a resource. A lot of distance in the history. Whatever that means in terms of town, that's got that. You got another member of the board that goes back, selectmen, finance committee, 15 years on school, understands process, knows boards. You got another member that has been involved in this creation of this document, so understands, where this is coming from, so that, you can ask questions of that person to find out where this is supposed to go, where this is supposed to be taking. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, that's pretty good. That's a good starting spot. So I'm thinking the town administrator's got resources. So when I talk about what do I see on the board, that's what I see. I'm looking at the positive, maybe, but that's what I see. So, I'm testing all these little things, trying to figure out what is a candidate going to see when they come here as things that can be good for this position. Well, that's what I see.
I guess the only other thing I'd just like to add is that, in this process, we met with a number of different town administrators to talk with them about the reality of their jobs.
Yeah.
And I think it's still on the table with the select board to hire a consultant to help with some of the policies and procedures and things like that. Because, there still has to be a priority, and that's the role of the select board, and will be the role of the select, say, what are the top things that need to be focused on and how they'll measure success. But, we know that necessarily a town administrator can't do everything. We heard from town administrators that are so busy writing job descriptions, they can't do
Right.
the other stuff.
Right.
And, so that's why we try to,
Yeah.
see if there's funding through,
We got a grant from
You got a grant.
CMRPC for $8,500, I think,
Was it
to
what?
start doing some of that work.
Have you had the opportunity to utilize the community compact money at all?
yes,
Yes,
that's what
that's-
we're talking about.
That's what it is?
Exactly what that
Yeah.
is.
Good.
So that was
Good.
part of, the conversation.
Yep.
So I think that there's a reality of, when you say like, well, what's the priority? And I think the select board knows that document sort of says that it is the finance, it is the HR,
Yep.
it is the, as Beth said, the project management, because, the town wants this position. They said, well, what's gonna pay for it? And that was one of the big conversations, is how does it pay for itself? And we really felt like it's, if you can better project manage stuff and avoid the waste, if you can analyze how things are working, if you can avoid lawsuits and some of the nonsense that we're spending our time on because a particular project wasn't well thought out to begin with. The other boards, we wrote it so that the other boards, like the library trustees and stuff, can, go to this board. They all want the support.
Yeah.
So, I think it is, like Beth said, it's the collaborative aspect of it.
Yeah, that's what I'm finding.
It's really important, but it,
Wayne, what do you do? When you talk about measuring success, that's part of what I'm focused on. One of the qualifications I'm looking for is someone who has been measured, who has to meet criteria. When I've talked to the board, I say, okay, you've got to have some measurements to measure this person for success, and are they doing what you want in terms of on a weekly basis? Are they turning around a document that you've asked for? How do you measure success? And there are concrete ways to do this.
sure.
And you're talking like you've been involved in something like this.
No.
So that's why I'm asking, what do you do?
We're all, and I understand that. So, I think that that's important. But, that was one of the issues I had when I read the first document. There's a lot of some flowery stuff in there. you're not gonna get any, you say, no, once it's ethical, there's no one person's gonna show up and think they're not ethical. It's really, the proof is in the pudding of how they
Yeah.
behave. Everybody
Mhm.
thinks they're a great communicator, everybody thinks they're a people person. So it's really,
Yeah, they sure do.
you know, I mean, so
Yeah.
when you write that in like that's who we want, that doesn't really tell me anything.
Yeah.
I mean, if you see somebody's outside the box, I mean,
Well, come through,
Yeah,
come
so,
through
I
our
mean,
very
I-
educational process of being
I
a
mean, that's
candidate,
something
you'll
that-
find
that
out.
we did not write the job description
Yeah.
for the select board because they have to determine how they want to measure the success. Is it
Yeah, but,
responsiveness, is it not responsiveness? You know, so I can't, I mean.
But I think it would be helpful, and I think it would be a wonderful way to start, if you have a candidate come in who is experienced in being measured and can bring in some of those measurement tools and say, well, this is what has happened before. If you like some of these pieces, then why don't we work together and create some of these goals? Because, you know, continuous quality management of a candidate is usually the input of all four.
And that's a question I'd ask in your essays, to say, how would you as a town manager measure your success?
Yeah.
How would you expect I mean, because if the town manager in answering a question tells the board,
He's
you know,
doing a
how
good
they would
job.
like a board to measure their success, or how would they
Yes,
want the board to
yes,
measure their
yes.
success? I mean, if all they're gonna say is, oh, I'm a nice guy and I get along well with people, that's not gonna float anybody's boat. Our select board is not dumb, they're gonna know that that's not the candidate to hire. I mean, they want somebody that, you know, they can say, they saved us this money, they wrote X number of grants, they suggested these things, they solved this problem, they were not just collaborative, they, you know, got the budget done on time, they met those, there was no chaos in the process. I mean, that's reality, but
Sure,
if you ask them
sure.
how they want to be measured, I think you'll go really far in learning, you know, showing the Board of Selectmen how they might want to approach this candidate or not. I mean, if they don't have that up front, you're not going to learn it coming in after, so I think those things are important to figure out.
You're starting to sound like the mean us when we're doing candidate interviews.
And not
We have that first
not to
question.
be a broken record here,
Yeah.
but the other side too. How are you gonna measure your employees? How are you gonna develop your employees? How do you set them up for success? Those are all great questions to
Yep,
ask a
yep,
prospective
okay.
leader. Not only, you know, how do I wish to be led, but how will I lead?
Yep. Those are key.
Well, I got one more thing to check off tonight. Now, Bill, did your hand waver just a little bit? No? Went back down again, huh? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Walter Bickford.
Hi, Walter.
How are you? Served on a number of positions in town. You know, a town administrator, there's different levels of it. There's administration, there's management, then there's leadership.
Yeah,
Been a little talk about leadership. The leadership, in my opinion, should come from elected officials, not appointed officials. And you should be very careful about that. And on that score, I think whoever's hired should fit Berlin. You come up with all these criteria and knowledge, and degrees, and all, but they gotta fit Berlin. In my 72 years living in Berlin, going from walking behind draft horses and plows to where we are today, you know, Berlin, people still say to me today, how did you do it? Berlin has a high degree of sanity with respect to open space, controlling growth,
Yeah.
although we have an extremely aggressive and greedy developer right now looking at every piece of land he can. But to me, the ultimate goal of Berlin is keeping Berlin, keeping it small government, small agencies. And with respect to measuring our employees, the highway department, we've got the best highway department probably in New England. Should have been an internal appointee to leading that department, but nevertheless it wasn't. Fire department, the recent appointee, interim chief, I think is good. He loves the town, lives in the town. Already people who have left the department are thinking of going back again. So it's the fit that counts. This is a small town. I don't know about anybody else in this room, but I want to keep it that way in all the aspects of it, particularly open space and people knowing each other and sitting around coffee shops and talking. You know, we don't need any extravagant somebody coming in with bigger ideas and what they want to do with the town. So I think that's important. The word is fit. want somebody that's interested in a small town, wants to keep it that way, understands Board of Health regulations. I wrote regulations in the early 70s that stopped development of tracks in Berlin. It hasn't been enforced by recent boards of health, but that was a big granite. We decided years ago in this town that we would not allow community water or community sewage, because that would just open up the land, the development. And we want to do everything we can to keep Berlin, Berlin, and it can be done. We're in a process right now, the Conservation Commission, which I'm on, of getting mapping set up showing the amount of open space protected since 1900 to 1970, and then every decade. And we're also going to get in there the amount of development, residential units that have been developed in town, and that's going to eliminate everything that can't be developed again and focus on, there's 3 or 4 farms in town that are still functioning in agriculture. We want to protect those. So, I mean, talk about all kinds of paying and pay scales and all this other stuff, but the bottom line is, how does it influence keeping Berlin, Berlin, open spaces and agricultural lands, and keeping it a nice town? Clean waters, Northbrook is a tributary of the Assabet. It's clean water, you could drink it except for the tannin in it from decaying leaves. It's a great little town, we want to keep it that way. I don't want somebody from a metropolitan area or someone that, you know, expedient manager coming into town that doesn't fit. We need to have someone that fit. That's my humble opinion.
Boy, I grew up in Vermont, and you just took me there. You feel like the guy in the dike, the little finger in the dike guy?
We were there 10 years ago, but we're losing it fast.
Well, that's the thing. I'm sitting here thinking, I'm feeling bad for you, because I figure, like, you know, all these pressures are coming in, and, you know, you're not going to hold back some change. I think you might slow some things down. I hear Board of Health, I hear Conservation. You got the right angle on slowing things down, but stopping them.
1/3 of
No.
Berlin is unbuildable because it's protected open space either by reservoirs, by flood control projects, by town conservation land, nonprofit conservation land, state conservation land, and we want to go for 50%.
Wow, that's aggressive. I couldn't resist. We actually put a little number in one of the documents there, just to alert the candidates, you know, that there's some aggressive land management stuff going on in this
Yeah.
town.
Yep.
Before we wind up,
Though, I think Walter made some really good points, and I think there are 2, I would say, that's really important. One was, he was just talking about the management of projects. I mean, I think the reason the town has its character, came up in our conversations, is because we have a really talented planning board, have had one for a lot of years, the Board of Health, all of them, so we've got the right regulations. The challenge that happens for towns, I think, now is that you get really aggressive developers that play one side against another, and sometimes bad decisions happen because there isn't somebody here to manage those conversations. So I think
Yeah,
that's
I get
one of the
that.
important skills too.
Yep.
I mean, we've talked about the communication, and I just think that's really important, because I
Yeah.
think that's part of the reason we want this. I mean, the reason isn't, I mean, fit is really important, and it's understanding the character. I mean, there's a reason that, you know, you came in thinking we're a small 3,000 person town.
Yeah.
That, you know, but we have all those issues. The only reason is maintain the character that it has, and is still a 3,000 person town, and has the open spaces because of really great management. And we're not dumb like a lot of other towns, I would say. I shouldn't say they're dumb, I guess, but, you know, we've allowed development so we can afford to live here. There's a reason our tax rate is what it is, and, you know, people aren't priced out of the town from taxes, is because it was smart management. And so, you know, we're smart about knowing how to manage development, and, you know, there's gonna be different things that are gonna come, and so I think that's what we want. So, I mean, I think Walter's right in that regard, that, you know, that's what we want. So, I mean, it is about maintaining the character of the town, and it really is that in order to maintain that, we need some expertise to make sure we continue to make the right decisions.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
the volunteers, Beth made that comment, you know, it's hard to get people to volunteer for committees because there's so much expected and there's no support. And if people feel, I mean, even for the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, I get that burnout issue.
Selectmen many years ago, and it's a far more complicated job today, and I wouldn't even think of running for it today without that kind of support. And it's like, if the town wants to attract talent, that's why we want, on our committees, that's why we want this position, to be able to give them some support and the knowledge. So I think that's
Yeah,
another.
one of the names I've heard is a Mr. Wheeler, is that correct? Yeah.
Wheeler and Sawyer.
Which one?
Jim Wheeler from planning.
Yeah, there's,
The name
Sawyer and Wheeler.
yeah, those are a couple of names I was hearing, and I would have liked to have met, but it's all right. I got an idea. They're incredibly
You can go to the
important.
Historical Society, they have a wheel, and it's the history of the Wheeler family, and they have a saw, and it's the history of the Sawyer family.
But before we wind up, this, I want to give the opportunity to the selectmen, this is a great part.
Just one quick thing to say.
Absolutely.
Please, I know you mentioned before, but if there is someone who has read the stats of the town and know the financial position of the town, and they're leery, they don't belong here, okay?
If they're leery about what,
If they're
please?
leery about coming as the first administrator,
Well, if they're reading the stats, they shouldn't be leery.
that,
He's
well, I
In good shape
think
there,
you were
yeah.
alluding to the fact that, because there's never been a town manager, there's some work to do to bring continuity between what they expect and what the Board of Selectmen or other boards expect. But if they're leery, that's okay, they can stay where they are.
Oh, I agree. I'm just stating, because we
It's a
do the
political
searches, and I'm
reality.
just stating the reality of people looking at a community, and it would be the first time. And again, what I said earlier, Lynn, is that person may be in another town in a very comfortable position.
And that may be where they should stay.
Maybe, yeah, right. Because,
We'll mention
and
it.
the only reason I'll say that is because the unknown is coming into a place that has never had one.
But if you have.
That's
good
the
lead-
unknown.
No track record,
If you
yeah.
have good leadership skills, you don't second guess yourself.
I agree.
Okay,
And,
so
yeah.
if they're concerned, let them be concerned. And number two, maybe the topic for your little essay that the individual is doing is what value added can you bring to the town?
Yeah.
Mm,
He even wrote it down.
I am.
Hi.
What I struggle with is trying to stay Berlin while all the other towns around us want to grow.
Yeah.
And we then have to deal with all of the fallout from that. Traffic, pollution, I don't know, there's lots to add to. And then we don't get any of the benefit of all of that because we're not, we want to stay Berlin, yet we have to struggle.
Yeah, I don't know how you've done it, really.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's
Yes.
very tough.
It's
Very tough.
If you notice, it's a lot of what has happened is on our outskirts around
Yes,
the town.
you're so
but,
fortunate.
even to see Reese's Flats go I'm born and grown up here, and it's
Terrible.
my line at home is, I think Vermont's looking good. But that's what I struggle with, is wanting the town to stay where it is, yet but not lose out on what everybody else is gaining, but not have it come into, I don't know how to
It's
word it. Does
balance.
anybody else?
It's balance.
Does
It's
anyone know where
balance.
I'm
It's
coming
balance.
from?
You want the services and those types of things, but you don't want the fundamental character of the town to change. So there has to be a balance between those items.
Right, right. And it's not unique. It's not unique to you. I'll give you a perfect example. One of the towns that sits right in the middle of a lot of stuff, and we know the town administrator over there, is Carlisle. Do they have anything going on in terms of business development? Zero. How much traffic do they get? You can't get through their center in the morning, in the evening, and those residents sit there and say, we get nothing out of this except everybody else's traffic comes through our community. We don't get any tax revenue, we don't get any of that, because where they sit, they're just a cut-through community, if you will. And they're facing that same issue. And to Lisa's point, the one thing, and I know the elected officials understand that, your town continues to grow, whether you want it or not, in terms of the budget. I saw the regionalization you're doing with the schools, but trust me, that budget's gonna continue to go up. It ain't gonna go down. And I think you all know that, and so you gotta think, longer range. How do we sustain everything, to Walter's comments, but keep ourselves who we really are? That's the dilemma everybody faces, and
Did you want to expand on that, Lisa? I mean, you're a rare public speaker anyway, so, you know. It's your, I want to get to the Board of Selectmen and give them an opportunity, because they're in the rare situation that they have to have meetings, they have to do all the talking, and it's reversed here. You folks got to do all the talking.
And my preference actually is to facilitate. It's not to take over, or it's to facilitate and try to help people get to where they're going. That is how I see my role.
Okay, fair enough. With the period, right? That's the period. I'm end right there. Okay. And Chris, a thought?
I'm getting a little emotional. I mean, they've put their finger on it. They've said exactly what Berlin is and what Berlin needs.
Yeah,
and-
good.
And just so
Yeah.
you've got it all in your notes. And, you know, I'm very proud to be a part of this community.
I think the difficult thing is going to be what compromises to make, and what your priorities are when you're confronted with an impossible situation.
for the new administrator you're talking about?
Pardon?
For the new administrator coming on board, or?
No, the administrator has to be aware of the priorities.
Yeah.
And when he comes up with a situation where you've got two conflicting ideas, he's got to know the values so he can make the correct choice and review it with the select
The appropriate
board.
people, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you want to say anything? You haven't said anything. Okay. The camera's not pointed at you, so it's okay. Did it, you know, it seems like we're at a natural point here to wind up, and I just want to give a final opportunity to anybody that wants to say anything before I mention the decaf and the regular coffee and the calories are just sitting right, great things. Walter?
Yeah, I want you to tell me what you see as the relationship between an administrator and elected Board of Selectmen.
Well, each town's different, but what I see is right here in this act.
Okay.
And you've had some passionate discovery moments here with these three former members here of this committee, or current members or whatever. I guess the committee's not here anymore, so I guess they're former members. But is the right word, it's a collaborative situation. There's no way around it.
It's a selectman administrator role.
It's a collaborative
The
situation.
selectmen are the executive body, the administrator is the administrator.
Good.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Sorry, I didn't attend the first meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way around that, and
Yeah.
I think it's the right choice at this time in this situation in the town, and it'll grow from there, but I don't see it needing to change anytime soon if that works, if you folks choose, and at that point, you know, the finalist will be your choice. If you choose and you support each other through the first year and a half, you know, it'll go the way, whatever way you choose to have it go, and I really like the town. I think it's great. If I were younger, I'd be applying. I think it's a great situation, and I would love to be helping out. Yeah. You know, I hope you get somebody with the right spirit. You know, that's what we're committed to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
How far away do you live?
My color of my hair says something different, I'm afraid. No, I'm just right down the road in Framingham, but, yeah.
That's a city, isn't it?
Oh,
It is now. It changed from the
yeah.
town government.
I was driving over
That's still a
thinking,
dispute in
you know,
Framingham.
this town's kind of
Yeah.
closer to my kids than Framingham is. I got to think about this, you know?
All the apartments they built.
Oh,
Yeah, well, let's not go
That's
there.
what caused the,
I guess we can just call this ended, and if you want to wander up here and chat with me and indulge in the calories, and please feel free to, because I really like what happened here tonight, and I thank you very much for it.
I thank you too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cookies. Grab the cookies.
They're not coming back with me.